Hi, I'm Daniel, and around November's Day of the Dead. It's probably a bad translation, but I don't want to pronounce the actual name. I don't celebrate this holiday, but in the mid-2010s there was two animated films about the holiday with a similar seeming synopsis. A guitar-playing guy whose family disapproves of him playing music being sent to the land of the dead with skeletons and has to get back. However, they are actually more different when you go deeper in the plot, and it was just a weird coincidence of how similar the two look. Both are films where I have some stuff to talk about, but aren't enough for a full analysis. So I decided to combine them by talking about them separately, then comparing them after. First, The Book of Life was released in 2014 by a studio named VFX that barely does anything. Only films like Ugly Dolls and Free Birds. So what's the story? Gods in charge of the Land of the Remembered and the Land of the Forgotten make a deal to switch if this girl ends up marrying one boy or the other boy. God in charge of the Forgotten sends the one he didn't bet on to the dead, so Manoyo has to find his way back to the living. Like the universe in this film, and the two Yans are created extraordinarily. However, I won't spoil this film by the world of Coco, but something happens at the end that starts to mess up the concept of death. The journey part is as generic as most of the time it's used, and it barely takes up any of the movie, and the pacing is spread out well here. The love triangle is a tired premise which isn't handled quite good here, but it is more a friendly rivalry, except one argument which is really petty. The other guy isn't villainized or treated as an obstacle in the narrative, but it is extremely predictable. I don't think anyone doubted Manoyo would win for a second, even when he died. There is also a wraparound segment with detention kids on a field trip being told that story, and it's bad. It feels like a way of dumbing down the movie for younger audiences, and it would be fine for just the opening and ending, but the film occasionally cuts to them drawing scenes. The story is okay, but it has a lot of problems. As for the animation, the main character is designed really well, but the background characters look weird and it is very easy to spot the main characters. Some characters have a 2D look, and this is because the creator is a fan of them art or books, which I never had since they are so expensive. We wanted to move to resemble what the art book is, and I appreciate how stylistic and different this looks visually with the puppet characters. I wish the wraparound segments would use a different style because I hate their designs. This design style doesn't work when you're trying to do modern day humans. Skeleton designs are better than the human designs, and the gods look so cool, and when it's focusing on just them, it is CGI at its best. The backgrounds also look superb, and although some designs still look weird, overall the animation is great. As for the movie's characters, Manoyo is a generic main character type that's getting tiring. He isn't bad but not interesting. Rhea has some personality, but the film seems to think she's more complex than she actually is. I like how Joe Quinn isn't a villain, but that unique subversion doesn't make him a unique character. The main two god characters are great, and the highlight of the movie when they're on screen. They contrast well, with one being more over-the-top comical and the other a more omniscient force. This is very nitpicky, my only real point with them is I would prefer it if they weren't gendered. Also, there is Candlemaker, who is okay for a small screen time, but definitely overshadowed by the other two. And there is the Sanchez family, who are most of small roles aside from four. Out of them, the grandma is funny, and the parents have a decent conflict. Raquel is a fourth protagonist when it wasn't leading a film with interesting conflict already. The climax didn't need to be a battle. To the music now, it's a combination of all the existing songs and original songs. The other the existing songs were apparently chosen because it was personal songs to the creator, and it doesn't feel too out of place in the Mexican setting. It probably helps that the main character is a musician and sings a variety of different music genres. As for the original songs, they are good, especially the apology song. It's easily the best song in the film for the music and the meaning. Also, I Love You Too Much is pretty good. This is a quality film, maybe even great, but it has a lot of flaws holding it back. While it isn't quite independent, being less mainstream makes it feel more like a creator's vision. This still got cinema release and enough marketing that I started back in 2014 when it came out. But it has status yeast. It's not exceptional, especially compared to the other films that came out the same year, but it's still sad how much it got overshadowed by another film 3 years later. Coco is a film by Pixar that was released in 2017, but production started in 2010 and was announced in 2012, so it isn't a Book of Life rip-off. I think people who call it a rip-off aren't aware of how long most films take to make. It's on average about 4 years. When the trailers came out, me and most people thought it would be a weaker Book of Life that will be one of the worst Pixar films. When it finally came out, it was heavily praised. There will be spoilers when discussing this film, so if you haven't seen Coco, watch it before continuing. Or not. Miguel likes to play music, but his family disapproves of it because their great-grandfather left the family for music. Miguel figures out his idol Ernesto Cruz was his grandfather, and ends up getting sent to the Land of the Dead on a holiday. To get back to the Land of the Living, he needs to rescue a family member, and since his close family won't approve of him being a musician, he has to get from Ernesto, with the help of Hector, a skeleton who wants to be on someone's offender. The story does a good job of hiding how it's just a glorified road trip movie, mainly with the high stakes Miguel needing to get back tonight. It's also entertaining throughout, so the pit stops of scene freeze and the music contest don't feel any bit unnecessary. The story has two main plot twists. Hector being Miguel's real father is predictable after a certain point, but Ernesto being a villain isn't. Especially the length of what he did. The climax of getting Hector's picture works for how the plan is set up and how it isn't just a physical battle. I think the universe of how the afterlife works is done better than the Book of Life since there is systems to it and it spends most of the time on one instead of multiple. It also has a great feel remembering. The original plot was about getting to move on after someone's mother died. What was changed when more research was done about the Day of the Dead? This makes the film's emotional moments superb, especially when thinking about Hector's story. He wanted to go back to his family, but he got poisoning and died. Then he spent probably 8 years judging by how old Coco seems in the Land of the Dead, not able to pass the border, and hearing that his friends stole his songs, and became one of the biggest musicians ever. The main emotional scenes really hit when they want to, and the ending concludes everything in a very satisfying way. Some parts do feel a bit calculated to be a light movie by both families and critics. But that doesn't matter to me, because I like a urination, it happens there a lot more. Feels a bit more calculated than the usual Disney or Pixar animated film, but doesn't stop how great the story is. As for animation, it's not that different from the usual CGI that often Pixar uses, but that isn't bad. The skeleton designs are good, I don't mind the eye thing since it makes them more expressive. The best thing visually is that the world looks superb with the colours and details. Now onto the characters. Miguel is a good protagonist, not any better than that, but he is someone the audience wants to succeed in his goals. The comedic side characters secretly being tragic will reveal later, becoming a trope tied to a trope, but I really like Hector and the way he was presented. He is good at comic relief and his backstory makes him interesting, and the audience thought on him changed on rewatches. The Riviera family mainly focusing on Abuelita and Mama Imelda, not even Miguel's parents or the title character. The rest are side characters, and while I don't really care about the alive ones, family in the Land of the Dead have some small personality due to the more screen time given. The reveal of Dante being an LGBT adds to his character and helps explain the contrived story with Miguel meeting Hector in the first place. Ernesto de la Cruz is a great example of an effective twist villain, who is better for what he represents. He is an idol who turned out to be a bad person, and he actually won for a long time because no one found out what he did. Even if Hector figured out he was poisoned and tried to accuse him, he is dead, and while his reputation might be ruined in the Land of the Dead in the best case scenario, the living will still treat him as a great influential musician. Ernesto does a good job playing an approachable persona, and his character turn is because he has always been like that. It was kind of yucky Miguel got sent to the dead, because it was a way of fixing the wrong done, and that might be why he was sent and not because he stole from the dead. You telling me most criminals decide to not steal on this day? It was probably a way of the universe trying to fix the wrongs with his family and the guitar. There are probably loads of dead celebrities in a similar situation to Ernesto, without a way of finding them out. Honestly, it's hard to find things to do when anyone who could have known is dead. This point of discussion is why I wanted to analyse Coco in a more in-depth way. The more I look into what Ernesto represents, here's a contender for the best Disney twist villain. Back to the characters, they lead the film well and are likeable. The film has music, but I don't think it's a musical, because songs are songs in universe, and its music is part of the story. Remember Me is the main song. It's great for all versions that change the feel, but it's not the only great song. Iorona sounds amazing and Coco is fun, and Valkyrie Sen is such a brilliant ending song. Even some more forgettable songs like The World Is Me For Me, yeah, are still good, and while I usually don't like score on its own, this movie has a great one. Especially the opening track, Wohi Shoemaker. This is an amazing film. It's probably the weakest middle child in the trilogy of Inside Out, Coco and Soul, possibly because Pete Docter didn't direct this. But it is still one of the best Pixar films for the great characters and themes being executed superbly. Without comparison, I think by both my views it's clear I think Coco is better, and the story and character in that film is easily better. In terms of animation, Book of Life is interesting and stylistic, but overall Coco has to be slightly better. I am also going on Coco with the topic of music because of how great the songs are. I didn't mention comedy, but both are pretty mixed, but Book of Life is probably slightly better. I'm not Mexican or know a lot about the culture, but looking at this film from a cultural perspective, the Book of Life calls the holiday a translated name, and has to use wraparound segments to make it more general, but it is made by someone who used to live in Mexico. He told the other people working on the film to not visit Mexico and just rely on his experience, because it will get more of a tourist feel. No matter how much research Pixar puts into stuff, it is still very mainstream and will likely have that effect. I won't comment what's better in this section because I don't know, but that's some information, and not all people connected to the culture will think the same on what's better. Both do bring light on Mexican culture with similar stories, but there is loads of Christmas romance films with the same plot too. I wish these didn't have to exist in the same universe, could be looked at on its own. While Coco is the film accused of plagiarism, Book of Life will probably end up worse. Coco can easily talk about without the Book of Life, but it doesn't work the way around with Book of Life's identity being tied to Coco. Wouldn't be surprised in a couple years, some people think the Book of Life is the rip-off despite coming first. Honestly, this video isn't helping separate identity, but it was a convenient way to review two films. Conclusion, while one is easily better, both are great films that show from our culture, and I recommend both. It's interesting when similar movies come out around the same time. The situation with big film movies in 2018 and 2019. Pixar makes a lot of films I could make videos on. We like to make a video on why it's kinda overrated, but I'm scared I'll get more dislikes than likes. For films I have yes to say about, I might group with another film in the same category with something in common. Also, if you count my videos that are currently public, this is my 100th video, and it really puts in perspective how much of these I have made. The end.